I love Xenoblade Chronicles, and that's something I never thought I would say. Over the years, there have been many video game franchises that I never thought I'd become a fan of, but I'm usually able to give them a chance and enjoy them for what they are. But Xenoblade was different. I was convinced I would never be able to really enjoy a Xenoblade game, as it was just too strange and complex for me to get into. These massive JRPGs seemed to be full of stuff that I wouldn't like, so I never even gave the series a second look. It quickly became one of those things that just wasn't for me, and I pretty much ignored it whenever it showed up in a direct or had any new announcements. I even started to resent this franchise a little bit, as it got so much attention and I just couldn't understand why people liked it. But all of that has changed. In the past year and a half, I've gone from a Xenoblade dismisser to a full-on Xenoblade fan, finding hours and hours of enjoyment from every game in the series. Looking back on it, it's honestly a pretty sharp 180 turn of opinions and emotions. And with the third mainline entry in the series releasing recently, which I've been playing non-stop and loving, there's no better time to cover my personal history with this franchise. So I thought I'd share with you the journey I went on to get to this point. This is the story of how I learned to love Xenoblade Chronicles. Before we really get into it, you should know that these games are best experienced knowing as little as possible, so if you haven't played them before, you should really just give them a try yourself. But if you still need some convincing, don't worry, I won't be covering any major story spoilers from any of the games, and all the footage I'll be using will just be from the first few areas of each game. For as long as I've been playing video games, I've never been a fan of the RPG genre. I grew up playing and loving games like Wii Sports, Mario Kart, and 3D Zelda and Mario games. Wii Sports Resort is legitimately one of my favorite games of all time, so I'm not exactly a hardcore gamer. I tried playing a few RPGs here and there like Pokemon, but I could never get into them as I found them boring and confusing. As I started to become a more active Nintendo fan and started watching Nintendo Directs, there were always some JRPGs shown off like Fire Emblem, Dragon Quest, and Octopath Traveler. These huge and complicated games never appealed to me, and I couldn't understand why so many people loved them. Probably my first experience with the Xenoblade series itself was Shulk being in Super Smash Bros. I didn't think much of him, just that he was another hot-headed anime sword fighter from some JRPG. But really, I knew nothing about Xenoblade as a whole. Then while watching the January 2017 Nintendo Switch presentation, a mysterious new game trailer started, showing off a huge world with beautiful visuals. I was slightly interested in it, but the more info that came out and the more trailers I watched, I quickly lost that interest seeing how the combat worked, the over-the-top voice acting, and the anime waifu sword collecting. That was pretty much the final nail in the coffin for my opinions on the Xenoblade franchise, and I moved on knowing that these games just aren't for me. Fast forward to the September 2019 Nintendo Direct, where I was left very disappointed by the games revealed. None of the announcements were exciting for me, and the big final reveal of Xenoblade Chronicles Definitive Edition left me confused and frustrated. I genuinely didn't understand the hype and why everyone was so excited for this old Wii game coming to Switch, and slowly I began to resent this series even more because I didn't understand it. Okay, I'm sure you get the idea by this point. Basically, I wasn't exactly the biggest fan of Xenoblade, and as more time passed, it honestly seemed like I would never be able to enjoy a game from this series. Then one day in June of 2020, while indulging in my unhealthy obsession with collecting Wii U games, I decided to buy Xenoblade Chronicles X off of eBay. I'm not even sure why I did this, probably because it was only like $20 and most people say it's an essential part of any good Wii U collection. Plus the box art is pretty cool looking. But I didn't actually have any intentions of really playing it, so I left it to sit on my shelf for 9 months just collecting dust. Then for some reason, probably out of pure boredom, I popped Xenoblade Chronicles X into my Wii U and gave it a shot. I was immediately impressed by the world building, exploration, and sense of scale. And for a Wii U game, the graphics looked really great, and I'd eventually learn that pushing the system hardware to its absolute limit is somewhat of a Xenoblade tradition. Although the combat system in X was very complicated and went completely over my head, I kept on playing, getting pulled deeper and deeper into the world of Planet Mira. But the more I played, the more I tried to understand the complex systems in the game, which I just couldn't do. I understood the basics of the combat, but I still can't explain how it all works. I basically just end up clicking as many buttons as possible until I win. The longer the story went on, the less interested I became in it, and the difficulty really started to heat up too. Then during about 2.5 hours of playtime, a blackout happened, cutting off the power to my Wii U and losing all my progress up to that point because there's no autosave system. I know I probably should have saved by then, but I didn't. When I finally booted it up again and saw that I was all the way back where I was nearly 3 hours ago in playtime, I put the game down and never went back to it. But even with that frustrating end to my time with the game, I still enjoyed it a lot more than I thought I would. But I was far from a Xenoblade fan. Just because I liked this strange spin-off game doesn't mean I would really enjoy any of the other Xenoblade games, right? With my interest in the series slowly rising again, I started looking into the original Xenoblade, and what I found online was an extremely passionate community around the game, with many people calling it one of their favorite games of all time. Most of the compliments were directed at the story, world design, and music. This confused me a little bit, because while the story and music in Xenoblade Chronicles X were decent, they were far from incredible. The more I learned about the original, the more it seemed like my type of game. At the time I was in a bit of a video game drought, so I was looking for a big, epic, and exciting adventure to dive into, and the first Xenoblade looked like it might just be it. So I ended up driving over to my local Best Buy and picked up Xenoblade Chronicles Definitive Edition for the Switch, and boy was I in for a big surprise. Within the first few hours of playing this game, I was completely caught off guard and really impressed by the story. As I mentioned before, I had a version of Shulk in my head created from Super Smash Bros. As a cocky, hot-headed British boy who's all like,
"Now it's Shulk time! I'm really feeling it! This is the Monado's power!"
So you can imagine my surprise when I started the game and found not an arrogant and overconfident anime boy, but instead a quiet, reserved, and thoughtful character who clearly cares a lot about the people around him. In the early hours of the game, Shulk is pretty much the opposite of how I thought he was. The entire story surprised me with how much I liked it. To say that the story was a big upgrade compared to what I had seen in Xenoblade Chronicles X is a bit of an understatement. That game has a fine story, but the original has a much more personal and human feel to it. The biggest reason I enjoyed this story so much is because of the characters. This game has a huge cast of characters, but you learn to care about each one because they're introduced individually throughout the journey and given their own backstory and development. I haven't felt this connected to a cast of video game characters in a while, and a huge part of the reason why is the voice acting. For some reason, the fact that everyone has a British accent makes it so much better, and I really enjoyed all the voice acting. It seems like the voice acting is either love it or hate it, because a lot of people don't like how cheesy it sounds, which I can totally understand. There are plenty of moments that are just hilarious because of how over the top and awkward it can be, but during the really important emotional scenes, the voice actors do a great job at pulling you into the moment. I also really love the mix of genres. It's an interesting combination of fantasy and sci-fi. While I don't think the story is totally perfect, I still absolutely loved the narrative of Xenoblade Chronicles and I really enjoyed the wild ride it puts you on. But as much as I liked the story, the two elements that really made me fall in love with this game are the music and the world design. The soundtrack for Xenoblade Chronicles is just incredible. I think it's one of the greatest video game soundtracks of all time. There are an insane amount of fantastic songs with gorgeous melodies that create an amazing sense of atmosphere. Just like the story, there's so much emotion in the music, and it feels intensely personal. It nails the quiet, reflective tracks while also having intense and epic songs as well. There are seriously too many great songs to name, and a huge amount of my enjoyment came from listening to the soundtrack as I played through the game. It's quickly become one of my personal favorite OSTs, and I've been constantly listening to the music in my daily life since finishing the game. I could probably make an entire video just praising the soundtrack, but I think you get the point. I really love Xenoblade's music, and it's probably the biggest reason why I fell in love with the game as a whole. The other major element that I loved about this game is the world design. Exploring the massive and varied landscapes of the Bionis and Mechonis was really what kept me eager to play more, as pretty much every area in this game is jaw-droppingly beautiful. The world has an incredible sense of scale, giving you a sense of awe and wonder as you take in your surroundings. Every time I thought I'd seen it all, I'd get to the next area of the game and have my mind blown all over again by how creative and impressive the world design is. I was consistently blown away by the world around me, and exploring this strange alien landscape was one of my favorite parts of the game as a whole. And while a part of me is sad that it took me this long to play this amazing game, I'm grateful that I got to experience the world of Xenoblade for the first time with the Definitive Edition, which just looks stunning on the Nintendo Switch. Even when I didn't fully understand the story or combat, I was totally invested in the game because of the terrific soundtrack and engaging exploration. I was kind of familiar with Xenoblade combat thanks to X, but this game has a much simpler and more refined combat system that finally clicked with me. You're encouraged to be moving around the battlefield at all times, trying to get in the best position to attack. Having Rein distract the enemy so Shulk can sneak around the back and deliver a devastating backslash feels pretty dang good. And while I still don't love the combat as much as the other elements in the game, I've really come to appreciate it for what it offers. But I definitely still don't fully understand all the complicated systems that this game has. Like I don't even know what this menu screen actually does. But luckily these aren't the sorts of things that I really care about in games. The things I do care about like the music, story, world, and exploration are all so good that I'm fine with not fully comprehending all the best combat strategies and complex systems. I ended up absolutely loving this game and everything in it. And even though it wasn't the type of video game genre I normally play, it quickly became one of the best video game experiences I've ever had, leading me to wonder what else this series has to offer. After loving my playthrough of Xenoblade Chronicles, I briefly looked into playing the second mainline game in the series, but it seemed so much different from the first game, and in ways that I wasn't really a fan of. I won't get into the whole thing right now, as the discussion surrounding this game online is honestly pretty toxic, so I'll just say this. Even though I personally don't like a lot of the things in Xenoblade Chronicles 2, I'm in no way trying to say it's an objectively bad game. It's just my personal opinion, and if you absolutely love this game, that's awesome. I won't try and force you to see my perspective, and I hope you'll do the same for me. Anyways, at this point I'd pretty much decided that I was satisfied with just playing the original, and wasn't too interested in the sequel. Thinking my Xenoblade journey had come to an end, I was happy I was able to understand this series better. Then in the February 2022 Nintendo Direct, this happened. A brand new entry into the Xenoblade Chronicles series was announced, Xenoblade Chronicles 3, and it looked to be a combination of styles from the first and second games, bringing it all together into one definitive package. And just like that, I was pulled right back into my Xenoblade journey. This new game looked incredible, and I knew that I would have to go back and play through the second game to have a full understanding of the story on launch day. And after making it through the main story of Xenoblade Chronicles 2, I can say that I've found a lot of things to love about this game. There's still a lot that I don't like, both gameplay and story-wise, but I was able to appreciate things like the music and world design. Seriously though, this game has a fantastic soundtrack. Playing through this game was worth it for the music alone. But there were even lots of story moments I liked, despite everything else I didn't. Zeke and his pet turtle are just the best. And while I liked the cast of characters less than the first games, I grew to really like the party by the end of the game. And that classic Xenoblade formula of exploring gorgeous massive open areas with the best music ever in the background is still in this game, which is probably my favorite part of every game in the series. Playing through this game was kind of a strange experience, because it had a lot of the same elements that made me love the first game, but there was so much new stuff that I really just didn't like. The frustrating gacha blade collecting system, annoying field skills that discourage exploration, and weird story moments that left me feeling confused and uncomfortable. I'm a much bigger fan of the original compared to this one, but I was still able to find the elements of the game that are worth playing and experiencing. And while this game might not be my personal favorite, I've come to a more full understanding of Xenoblade Chronicles 2 and why people like it now that I've played it. Just because something isn't exactly what you wanted it to be doesn't mean you can't find things of value to enjoy. I think it's really important to be open-minded enough to learn how to appreciate the things you don't personally love. Moments like exploring Gormott for the first time with that incredible theme playing were genuinely fantastic, and at the end of the day I'm glad I played this game. All the core elements of what makes Xenoblade so amazing are all mostly here in this game. There's just an extra layer of over-the-top anime cliches that stopped it from reaching the heights it could have for me personally. But again, this is all just my opinion, so don't let my words affect what you think of the game yourself. So basically, while there are still a lot of things I don't like about this game as a whole, I understand that it's just my own subjective thoughts, and not everyone agrees. And now that I've finally played through the game myself, I was able to find so much that I do like about it, and experiencing Xenoblade Chronicles 2 got me ready and prepared to really dive into the third game. Luckily, this story has a truly happy ending in the form of Xenoblade Chronicles 3. It's been a few weeks since this game was officially released into the world, and I've been playing it a ton and absolutely loving it. Honestly, it feels like the best case scenario for this series, combining all the best aspects from the previous games into one complete experience. It really feels like Monolith Soft took a lot of the criticisms of Xenoblade 2 and listened to the feedback, creating a much more polished game with less rough edges. The fantastic storytelling, incredible soundtrack, and gorgeous world design is all here again, but without the stuff like blade collecting that I personally didn't like about the second game. The combat system feels better than it ever has before, the cutscenes look even more amazing and cinematic, and there's this overall feeling of cohesion to the world that makes exploring it feel awe-inspiring. I especially love the variety that changing classes brings to the gameplay, and the music has somehow raised the bar for what's possible once again. The emphasis on flutes might just be one of the best things my ears have ever heard. I've consistently been impressed by this game, and it keeps surprising me in new and exciting ways. It's even given me that sense of wonder and magic that's so rare to find these days. I'm talking about that feeling of first exploring the open world of Hyrule in Breath of the Wild. I get excited every time I pick up the controller and click A on that beautiful title screen, ready to get fully immersed in the world of Ionios. To me, it feels like this game has the potential to bring the fanbase back together again with some common ground. We may all disagree with a lot of each other's opinions involving past entries, but I think all of us can agree that this new game is terrific. The opening hours of this game blew me away with how engaging and impressive the story is, pulling you into a war-torn world full of fascinating lore and history. Right off the bat, I really liked all the members of the main party, and as the game has gone on, I've started to like them more and more. Each has their own motivations and personalities, with interesting backstories that flesh them out and help you really connect with them. I'm still only about halfway through the main story, so I don't know how everything is going to end, but I can already tell that this story is doing a great job at bringing together the two worlds of past Xenoblade games. Whether you like Xenoblade 1 or 2 more, there's lots of stuff in this game for you to enjoy. I'm not trying to say that this game is absolutely perfect and flawless, but it's been everything I wanted it to be and so much more. I don't want to get into modern Nintendo and their free update strategy right now, so I'll just say that it feels really great to play a fully complete game full of passion and attention to detail again. So far, this game has given me some of the most satisfying hours of gaming I've had in a long time. Sometimes you manage to play the right game at just the right time in your life, and I think I might have hit the timing perfectly with this one. But who knows, maybe it's just recency bias that's making me feel this positively about Xenoblade 3, but it really doesn't feel like that. I think the developers have done a beautiful job at combining it all together in a way that makes sense, and it deserves some recognition. I think this also feels so special for me because it's the first time that I've gotten to enjoy a Xenoblade game at launch with the rest of the world playing it for the first time right alongside me, which has been really cool. It has kind of sucked trying to avoid spoilers since they're spreading everywhere, but I can feel the Xenoblade energy in the air, which makes playing the game even better. I've really just been trying to enjoy my first playthrough of this game, because something this special doesn't happen every day. The epic and engaging story, the quality of life improvements to the gameplay, and the amazing combination of the best parts of past Xenoblade games all make this game possibly my favorite entry in the series yet. I can't say for sure since I haven't finished it yet and want to let it sit in my mind for a while before coming to any conclusions, but I think it's likely that Xenoblade Chronicles 3 will surpass the original for me, which honestly I thought was impossible. As I've been playing this game over the past couple days, it's got me reflecting on the journey I went on to get to this point. All the experiences I had with this series, both the positives and negatives, got me to a point where I could truly enjoy this new game for everything it has to offer. The fact that right now I won't shut up about how much I love Xenoblade Chronicles 3 is something that I never thought would happen, but I'm so glad it did. And that's the story of how I learned to love Xenoblade Chronicles when I never thought I would. Even though I didn't have the absolute best experience with Xenoblade Chronicles 2, I can still say that I love this series as a whole. There's so much amazing world building, great characters, incredible music, and memorable moments from each game. I still have to finish my playthrough of Xenoblade 3, and I also want to go back and give X another try, so this isn't the end for me and Xenoblade. I've learned a lot from this experience, and I'm so happy that I ended up playing through this series of games and that I was able to enjoy them as much as I did. I think we're all often guilty of resenting the things we don't understand, when really everyone has perfectly valid reasons for loving the things they do, even if we don't personally agree. And while I'm not going to suddenly become a huge JRPG fan and totally change my personality, in the future I can try to be a little less quick to judge others who enjoy something that I don't. It's important to keep an open mind and try new gaming experiences every once in a while, because you never know if you'll find a new favorite game to fall in love with. It's totally okay to still have your own opinions, but just because you don't like something doesn't mean you have to resent it and the people who do like it. I hope you enjoyed this video format. It's pretty different to what I usually make. I wanted to try something new since this series has had such a big impact on me. The point of this video wasn't to try and convince you all to play Xenoblade, it was simply just me sharing my story and perspective. Honestly, I've been pretty scared of making this video for a while, since in my experience, people online are extremely dismissive when it comes to this series. In fact, there's probably a large portion of my audience who didn't click on this video just because the word Xenoblade was in the title and thumbnail. But I can't say I don't understand that, because I used to be the same way. Hopefully I didn't offend any of you die-hard Xenoblade fans with my opinions and overall inexperience. And I also hope I was able to make this video entertaining for those of you who really aren't into RPGs at all. That's about all I've got for this one, so thanks for watching guys and I'll see ya in the next one.